What's going on, guys? Zuko back with another Dragonflight video. I hope you're all doing very well. We're on the 10.1.5 PTR. Holy crap. Blizzard is not stopping, man. They are not stopping. They made some incredible announcements yesterday. They put the big roadmap out, and they're talking about everything that's coming down the pipe. They're just not stopping development, man. It's crazy. They will not stop. So we're obviously in patch 10.1 right now. It just started. They already have on the PTR, they have 10.1.5, and they've got obviously talking about things like the Mega Dungeon, a new Evoker Spec, which is what we're going to talk about today. There's a whole bunch of other things. I'm not going to get into all of it because I want to focus on the Evoker Spec today, but oh my goodness, we do in fact have a new Evoker specialization, Augmentation. So let's look at it right here. I'm actually have this cool shield thing on right now. Here's the new spec. Augmentation. So we kind of knew for a while that this was coming. A lot of people were speculating it was going to be a tank. It is in fact a DPS specialization, but it also has this support element to it, and we're going to dive into exactly what that means in this video. So again, imbues your allies with the might of the Black Dragon and bends time and fate in their favor with bronze magic. So what's going on here? Essentially, what's happening, from what I can see, is that the damage is probably going to be less than the other DPS classes, certainly less than Devastation Evoker, which is just focusing purely on damage. But it's maybe doing like a 50-50 split between damage and then giving the rest of your party members a whole bunch of buffs, which are going to buff their damage, their utility, their healing, their tankiness. Literally everything is on the table here. And I go through all the different abilities that are here because they're pretty cool. I've just been kind of looking at the tree a little bit. I haven't tested it too much. I've hit the dummies a couple of times, but realistically, I don't know how this kind of functions. We'll know a little bit later, but let's start with the very top. This big ability. This is called Even Might. Basically, what this says is that you and your 4 nearest allies, you're going to increase your primary stat by 14%. Of your own, which right now for me is 294. This is a very low geared character. Don't freak out about the numbers. This is literally not even a max level character yet. I don't have a max level evoker or a geared evoker, so don't worry about the numbers. And it buffs them, their intellect, and causes the eruption to deal more damage. That's your main essence spender now. Replaces disintegrate. So it looks like your single target damage is going to be pretty low. You don't actually have a single target essence spender anymore. You have an AoE spender. Kind of interesting there. But this is the main buff that you're going to keep up on your party members at all times. It's right here. I can press Shift 1. It's going to buff a bunch of people in there. I didn't really show very well there, but you can see the buff going up here. There are other abilities that will actually extend Even Might. And here, we'll just look at this right here. You can see all these have little notifications here. Increases the duration of your active Even Might by 3 seconds. Very interesting. Down here, Fire Breath grants Inferno. Blessing you and your allies who have Even Might does extra fire damage. I believe it's right here. Increases the duration of your active Even Might effects by 1 second. This is a spammable essence spender. So you can press your Even Might and then go right into an eruption. You could do a fully juiced eruption immediately with Tip the Scales, of course. And then you can use Upheaval as your empowered ability. Sorry, this is the one you would use. You would empower Upheaval here, and this would increase your Even Might by 3 seconds. And then you spam Eruption. It's increasing it by 1 second. And then, you know, you can eventually cast the spell again all on its own. So this is your main cooldown. It's going to apply Even Might for 5 seconds. So there's lots of ways to keep this buff going, and it's very essential. This is your main buff that you're giving to your 4 different allies. You're increasing their primary stat, and that's pretty good for every spec. It's not going to be a bad thing ever. So let me show you some of the DPS abilities really quickly, and then I'll get into the buffs. You can see there's literally 900 Evokers in here trying all this stuff out. So here's our main Empower. I can hold it down, Upheaval, and then you can see the circle gets bigger and then it detonates, which is kind of cool. And then we have Eruption. This used to be Disintegrate, but now it's an AoE ability. It just throws this little thing and it erupts right there. We still have Living Flame. You have all the Essence Burst combos, right? Living Flame has a chance to make my Eruption cost nothing. That's happening right now, and it does extra damage. Very, very cool. So I can keep casting Living Flame. I'm always going to try to get that Essence Burst proc going. That's the main mechanic for all Evokers. Nothing crazy there. We have a... I'll get to the tank external in a second. But again, here's the upheaval. Look at the circle get bigger. Bigger, bigger, bigger. And then boom, you detonate it. So very, very cool ability there. We still have hover, of course. Let's move down a little bit. Those are the DPS abilities. Here's a major cooldown. This replaces Deep Breath. It's called Breath of Aeons. Fly to a target location, exposing temporal wounds in enemies for 10.7 seconds. The temporal wounds accumulate 21% of the damage dealt by your allies affected by Eben Might. So you want to cast Eben Might first. Make sure it's on your allies. And then you press Breath of Aeons, and it's going to accumulate the damage that your allies are doing. And then it's going to crit for all the accumulated amount. 21% of the accumulated amount. Very cool. It also applies Eben Might, I think, right away. So I'm assuming you don't actually have to start with your own Eben Might cast. You can just do Breath of Aeons. Or you could start the fight with an Eben Might cast. And then you could, when it's about to die, you can chain into Breath of Aeons. So it's something like this, right? You go Eben Might, and then you do a really big upheaval. Boom, boom, boom. That extends Eben Might a little bit. And then we do one eruption. And then we're going to chain into Breath of Aeons. There we go. Boom. And then we debuff the enemies, right? They've got this temporal wound, right? So now it's going to crit them in a second here. Let's see the damage if it comes up. There's the crit at the very end. You can see it was orange, which indicates, of course, that it was done by our allies. So very, very cool. That's like not your major cooldown. It is your breath ability, but it's not like your biggest cooldown. That's at the bottom. So that's kind of cool. Then there's a bunch of just little buffs to essence stuff, of course. Living Flame hitting multiple enemies. While flying during Breath of Aeons, 50% of the damage you would take is instead dealt over time. That's the defensive thing. This is interesting here. Your Breath of Aeons will also shield enemies for 100% of the... shield allies, sorry, for 100% of the damage dealt. That's kind of crazy, right? So this one ability will debuff enemies, causing them to accumulate damage based on what your allies are doing. Then it detonates to do a bunch of damage. It applies Eben Might, and it shields your allies. So it does a lot of stuff. Very, very cool. Eruption is cheaper. This is the first, next ability that comes by. This is pretty cool. New ability here. Enchant an ally, reducing the threat they generate by 30%. So, kind of interesting. Probably powerful on an enhancement shaman with, Lava Lash. Ret paladins right now are pulling aggro like crazy. I don't think you're ever realistically going to use this. I'm not going to lie. I don't really foresee this being used, but it's kind of a cute idea. I just feel like it's got to do a little bit more than just reduce threat. Because, Tricks of the Trade just, literally reduces all threat, period. And, Misdirect from Hunters is just so much better than this. So I'm not really sure when you're going to use this. Here's another interesting idea. Bestow Wernstone. Essentially what this does... it conjures a Wernstone, one for you and one for an ally. Then you can each teleport to each other's positions. So some interesting utility there for classes that don't have their own teleport. I'm not exactly sure when you're going to use this. There might be a raid fight where this kind of works out well. We're going to have to wait and see on that. Then we get to the middle of the tree here. This is interesting. So in the middle, you have an aura. You can either buff your 4 allies' maximum health or their speed by 5% and 10% respectively. Then there's a massive buff to this down here. Obsidian Scales activates the health buff and amplifies it to 20% max health instead of 5 for 12 seconds. Hover activates the Bronze Attunement, amplifying it to 40% movement speed for 4.3 seconds. So my hover's over here. So if I'm attuned, you can see I have the bronze or the black. I'm attuned to bronze right now. If I hit hover, I get a huge boost in movement speed, 30% additional movement speed, and I give that to other people. If I have the health buff on instead, and I cast my defensive, which is Obsidian Scales, I get a big health buff, 15% additional, so 20% extra health total. A very interesting idea. It's sort of like a mini defensive cooldown for 4 of your allies and yourself, depending on which aura you have going. Then, if we go to the left side of the tree, we have a tank external. If we go on the right side of the tree, we have a healing external. And extra healing buffs over here. And then extra buffs to the Obsidian Scales thing here. This is this scale thing I put around myself. I can see it right here. You can cast this on a tank, and it will give them armor. Let me just read it here. Protect an ally with 20 explosive dragon scales, increasing their armor by 30% of your own. Melee attacks cause the target to explode, dealing volcanic damage to nearby enemies. Very, very cool. Now, you can see I've upgraded it to 20. That's this buff down here. Blistering Scales gets 5 more scales, and casting Eruption restores a scale. So you can essentially keep this buff going on the tank. You could start your fight by hitting them with this scales buff and then keep casting Eruption, and it will keep adding scales to them. So you can keep, again, it's going to do damage, which is really cool. It's also going to give your tank armor. Very cool idea. I kind of love this. On the healing side, Spatial Paradox, it basically gives a healer Spirit Walker's Grace, like a shaman, as they can move while casting for 10 seconds. This has incredibly strong utility, except that most people are not going to use it very well in like pug environments. I would say really high-end like Mythic Plusers and Raiders are going to make use of this incredibly well to basically give a healer free reign on a mechanic. You also don't have to target a healer. It'll just automatically go to a healer if they're in range. This is kind of interesting here. Symbiotic Bloom. Emerald Blossom increases target's healing received by 6% for 10 seconds. And then you can say your effects that extend your Even Might, which is like this, Eruption, and Upheaval, will also apply to Symbiotic Bloom. So you can cast Emerald Blossom. It'll heal 3 targets, and then it'll increase all healing they receive by 6%. You can see at the top of the screen. And then if I cast my DPS abilities, it'll extend this healing buff. So this one's a little bit harder to keep going, but this is kind of a cool idea. In a Mythic Plus dungeon, you can buff everybody and make them take 6% more healing for like a very long time if you extend it properly. So interesting idea there. Let's keep going. We're gonna go down here. This is called Prescience or it's not pre-science. I did a little, I don't know, it's like Processions or something. Anyway, I'm going to say it wrong. It's like Processions, I think. You give an ally a crit, 3% crit for 21 seconds, and then there's a couple of buffs to it that are very interesting. So this could give you Essence Burst, and then this is insane. Fate Mirror. Processions grants the ally a chance for their spells and abilities to echo their damage or healing, dealing 15% of the amount again. So I think this is insane. It's only a chance. So you want you want specs that have high uptime, high APM in terms of the number of abilities they're hitting. So like a Fury Warrior, an Enhancement Shaman, or what was I thinking here for this as well? The third one could be like a DH potentially. Havoc DH presses a lot of buttons really quickly. Fury Warrior would be the big one I was thinking of, where they're just pressing buttons all the time. So very insane. This could be like super strong if done correctly. And I think that potentially you give somebody crit and then their abilities just start chaining and echoing. Could do tons and tons of damage. So very cool there. We'll go over here to the left. This is interesting. Moats of Possibility. Your essence abilities have a chance to form a moat. Anyone who comes in contact with the moat gains 10 seconds of reduced cooldown on their major ability. Again, think of something like a Warlock Infernal or a Fire Mage Combustion, right? Or even Icy Veins or Arcane. Cooling down Arcane's cooldown would be insane, right? Arcane Surge is what that one's called. So yeah, I think you DH meta, Ret Paladin Wings, like this is insane. Depending on how much this thing procs, getting 10 seconds off of somebody's major cooldown could be game breaking, like really strong. So I think Moats of Possibilities is potentially one of the craziest things on here. Just depends how much it procs. And then here's kind of your final major cooldown. It's called Time Skip. Surge forward in time, causing your spells to cool down 1,000% faster for 2 seconds. That's 10 times faster is what I believe that works out to be. 10 times faster. So for every second that goes by, instead 10 seconds goes by, I believe. So I think what this does, you can also buff this to go for 1 second longer, which means 3 seconds total. I believe that this should take 30 seconds off of every cooldown. I don't quite know if that's correct, but I believe it's 10x the CDR rate, and then it's over 3 seconds. So every second for 3 seconds. So I think that we'll have to just see how this kind of actually works out in practice, but this is insane. A lot of your cooldowns are like 30 seconds or 40. There's a 40-second cooldown there. This is a this is just your essence one. This is a 30-second cooldown. Even Might is a 30-second. So you could like Even Might into Time Skip into Even Might again, right? There's also your, this cooldown here's a 1 minute 15-second cooldown. So getting 30 seconds off of this is huge. Lots of 30-second cooldown on Blistering Scales. Spatial's a longer cooldown, but Processions, you could get that back immediately. There's a lot of really cool combos here with all your different cooldowns that you have. You have tons of cooldowns Wernstone. You've got your timelessness up here. There's so many cooldowns for this spec. So very, very interesting idea, cooling them all down, potentially taking 30 or 40 seconds off the cooldown. I'm not even sure if I'm doing my math right there, but this is an interesting idea. All in all, what do I think about this spec? I think this is an interesting idea. I don't know. We don't know how good it's going to be. Obviously, it's literally the first day that it's been released on the PTR. It sounds like it has some really cool externals. So first of all, this extra damage that's going off all the time seems pretty insane. The extra prime stat that you're giving them. And it seems like you could keep even might up all the time. That's basically the playstyle. You want to keep this buff on your allies all the time, if possible. This cooldown seems really insane. The extra crit that you get at the end. If everybody else is blowing all their cooldowns, Breath of Aeons could do giga damage if you line it all up properly. That could be really crazy. The tank external is cool. The healing external is cool. It's cool that this tank one does extra damage. This processions thing seems really crazy if you're getting extra doubling or the echoing of the abilities that are going. This might be the most broken thing. Giving 10 seconds to the cooldown of a major ability on multiple specs is completely insane. Really, really good. And you can obviously dictate who gets this. Let's say you keep dropping motes all over the place, and then you just have your fire mage pick up every single mote. They'll never not be in combustion, or like whoever could benefit the most, wings on paladin, whatever the case might be. So that's really cool. And then of course the really, really big time skip is super cool. I think my first impression of this after looking at it for a while is that I think that like lesser players who aren't as good at the game, I think are going to struggle a bit to make use of all these different buffs. Players who are really good at the game and players who are in a coordinated group in particular are going to make insane use of these. So I think on a player that's not as good at the game, this is going to look like garbage. And on a player that's really good, has mastered this, and is in a coordinated group on like voice comms, they're going to look completely overpowered, I think. I think that's kind of where it's going to go. It's either going to be completely busted or it's going to kind of look like garbage. So we'll have to see. It really depends how much base damage the Augmentation Evoker can do on its own. And then to see like, are all of these buffs just icing on the cake, or is this a significant part of the damage coming out from Augmentation? So we're going to wait and see. They did say, Blizzard said in a post that they're working on some of the back end stuff to make sure that like the details damage meter will show the appropriate damage that you contributed. So don't worry too much about that. If you're worried about like, well, my damage is going to be garbage because it doesn't show up as my damage, I think they're going to be fixing that in a future patch. So very exciting. I love ultimately that Blizzard is willing to add a spec in the middle of an expansion. I feel like that really shows that they're confident about what's going on, and they really have a grasp on what they want this Augmentation Evoker to be, and that gets me really excited because I think this thing looks pretty fun. We're just going to have to wait and see about all the numbers. But let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Would you play Augmentation Evoker? That's the big thing I want to know from you. Would you play this thing? I'm actually kind of tempted. I was hoping for a tank spec, and then I absolutely would have played a tank Evoker. But this is also an interesting idea. I would love to hear from you guys in the comments down below. What do you think about the Augmentation Evoker coming out from Blizzard? Thank you guys so much again for watching. I love you all. I will see you in the next one.